welcome to the Natural Curiosity Show. I am really glad you're here. I'm glad I'm here. And I'm glad that we're all getting to meet Shawn Bucher. Hi, Shawn.
Hi, everybody.
Oh, this is great. We're not only on YouTube where you can actually see Shawn, but we're also on podcast. Wherever you like to listen to the podcast, that's where you can listen to it. And because I know there's people out there that are mowing the lawn, they're doing the laundry, they're driving. There's a lot of different things that you could be doing. So you want to be able to listen, right? So don't you worry about a thing. If you're doing any of that, there are show notes, and I will have those show notes for you with all the links that we talk about and a way to get a hold of Shawn. Because I'm sure that once you hear his story, you're going to want to reach out to him and find out a little bit more. All right, so let's get right into it, Shawn. Tell us who you are, where are you coming from, and how did you end up on the Natural Curiosity Show?
Oh boy. Well, so I am, you can tell kind of by my outfit, I'm a chef. And so my background is as a chef. I grew up in the kind of throughout the West. I was born in Idaho and lived on farms up there. And then we moved to Arizona for a while. And then later on, we moved to Utah, and then I moved to San Francisco and Farmington, New Mexico, and a few other places throughout my time. And then we've also lived, after my wife and I got married, we lived in Baton Rouge for a while, and then we lived in Southern California for a while, and the Hollywood area. And so we've had just kind of a gangbuster ride of moving all over and experiencing a lot of different things. You know, a lot of people who are in the food business tend to, kind of find a niche. They go into restaurants, or they go into hotels, or they go into grocery stores, whatever it might be. And they generally stay there. But for me, I'm kind of the opposite. I'm naturally curious. And so I always wanted to kind of go out and look at different things. I wanted to experience different things. I wanted to get a couple of years experience in a lot of different segments of the industry and kind of decide what I wanted to do. So that's what I did. I started out working in a grocery store meat department, and I was cleaning that at night. One of the grossest jobs I've ever had. But I was a young teenager. So like, whatever, I was getting paid. And I wanted to be an artist. I really wanted to create. And at the time, I had taken all the art classes I possibly could. And basically my high school guidance counselor said, look, why don't you go take some classes at this trade college? You'll get high school credit, college credit, we'll pay for it. And I thought, well, yeah, sure. So I looked through this course catalog and I saw culinary arts, and I thought, awesome, an art class. I'll be doing watermelon carvings and ice sculptures.
Awesome. That is so cool.
Yeah, well, it ended up not being what I thought it was. And I remember the first day I walked in, and the instructor said, okay, we're going to be doing lunch for 200 people in about 3 hours. And I thought, oh man, what did I get myself into? But I ended up sticking with it. This was in the late 90s, back when there was an NBA lockout. And the reason that that's applicable is that I was working in Salt Lake City at the time, where the Utah Jazz play, and basically the season was starting later. So all the cooks that were supposed to be starting there, feeding the 18,000 fans every game, just went and found other jobs. They couldn't wait around, for the season to start. So then owners and players finally agree, and they say, okay, season starts next week. And basically the chef out there put out this APB to all the culinary schools and said, if you can breathe, I will hire you. And so my instructor at the time said, this is an incredible opportunity. You ought to take advantage of it. And I thought, well, I don't even know how I get there. It's like 30 minutes away, and I don't have a car. And so I would take the bus for it was about an hour and a half one way to get there. And I would go and I would work. My first day in the kitchen, I was this overzealous, like 16, 17-year-old kid. And I want to show them how good I am, and chopped the tip of my finger off, dropped a knife in my foot, had turkey juice spill down my front and back. And I remember the chef looking at me being like, dude, you're not going to survive. Just go home. And the funny thing was, is so I had some perseverance, and I said, no, chef, I can do it. Please let me stick it out. And I ended up spending the next 8 years with him. He kind of became a mentor to me, and we moved around to multiple properties. I was able to go from the arenas into hotels, and then into multi-unit restaurants, and eventually into teaching. I was a culinary instructor for a few years, and that was a natural segue into consulting, which is exactly what I do now. So now I travel the world consulting and helping people with their food service operations and whatever segment of the industry they might be in.
Lucky you. I don't think
I was,
it's luck, but you know what I'm saying.
I was very fortunate to figure out what I wanted to do early.
Yeah. Wow, that sounds fantastic. And if you really like traveling and you really like food and creating art from food,
That's what led me here. The art class led
I
me
watch
here.
the cooking shows on
Mhm.
television, and I see the competitions. What's that chef that he's real mean to everybody, but everybody.
Oh, yeah, Hell's Kitchen, Gordon
Hell's
Ramsay.
Kitchen. There you go. And then they have a spin-off where he helps people that are home cooks, and they turn them
Hmm.
into these chefs and stuff. And I noticed that the people that really do well are the people that can plate it right. I mean, they could cook, of course, but the ones that make it look really nice and appetizing, instead of just splattered on there,
Oh,
are the ones that
absolutely.
end up winning.
Yeah. I mean, culinary arts is a real thing. It's, when they talk about you eat with your eyes first. And so, in the culture that we're currently in right now, um, it's almost as important how good it looks as to how it tastes, because we are in an Instagram society where everybody wants to take pictures of everything and post them, and that's great. It's definitely requires a different level of skill and understanding and education for the chefs and for the food service professionals out there, which is great because it makes us better. But it also it's a challenge. It's a challenge to be consistent. I part of what I gravitate towards is I gravitate more towards the business side now, which is ironic because I got into it because of the art side. But what I started to realize was there was a real disconnect. You either had these incredible artists who could make this beautiful food, but they couldn't make money to save their lives. And then you have these business people coming in looking at the restaurant business and saying, man, I can make a buck, but then their food just is terrible. And so, how do you get a chef to know business or a business person to know food? Like, you got to find a way. And so I actually started a podcast a few years ago called The Business Chef that we talk a lot about blending those two things, because there's a lot of people that I think they want to know how to do it. They just don't know where to turn, to do that. Because if you watch the TV shows, it's all about the plating. It's all about the theatricality of it. It's not necessarily a how-to kind of thing. And cooking's the easy part, honestly, because you're managing businesses that generally have people that have to work there versus want to work there. The hospitality industry is full of people that really don't have any other choice. Hospitality is always hiring, and a lot of times people are there serving or busing or whatever because they just don't have a lot of other choices. And it's really difficult to motivate somebody to do that. And if your business relies on people and customer service, it's a difficult thing to manage. So we're trying to kind of curb some of that and trying to help people out by teaching them how to make food, make money, which is our tagline.
Well, I watch another show. You can tell what I watch. Um, it's called Below Deck, and they're always focused around the chef, because if the food's not good, they're not getting a big tip.
Mm.
Their tip is going to suffer if the food's cold or it doesn't look good, or they
Yeah,
want
yeah,
5-star
absolutely.
service.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. It all ties together. The three things that make food operations successful are food, service, and consistency. So if if you've got great food and great service sometimes, but not other times, you're missing that consistency piece. You won't have the same clientele or the same following you do. If the food's great, people will come back, but if the service is terrible, they won't come back as often, So they all kind of, it's that trifecta where they all kind of support each other. It's gotta be good food, but you gotta be nice, and you gotta do that all the time.
Yeah, when I go out, I'm spending money and I want it to be a pleasant experience as well as have good food. You're right. I mean, it's a delicate balance, I'm sure, for the
Hmm.
restaurant owner.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, so I'm sure everybody's wondering why there's all these purple shirts behind you, and you have purple on your
Oh
shoulders.
boy.
Tell us about the purple.
It's actually black. I guess it's probably just the camera angle, but
Oh, okay.
I've got one of my chef coats on. I'm in my closet today because we have a contractor here at the house. I'm home. This is one of the rare times where I'm home, and yeah, we have a contractor here today, and it can be difficult getting them to show up, and so I didn't want to turn him away, and I just said, okay, I'll go up in my closet and you continue to work. So welcome to my closet.
That's wonderful. What area of the country are you in?
I live in Albuquerque, New Mexico. So
Oh,
we're currently down here enjoying the balloon fiesta, which is probably the biggest in the world. We have hundreds of hot air balloons that come and lift off every day for 10 days, the first and second weekends in October and the week in between. And so our population is about 30% more than what it usually is. So traffic's bad and restaurants are packed and the hotels are full, and that's great, but we're in the thick of it right now.
wow. Well, I'll just have to make that a destination.
You absolutely will. If you've never, I mean, especially with people's natural curiosity, if you will, towards flying and colors and, again, theatricality, there's just some incredible things down here. This is one of the only balloon fiestas where you can actually walk around and help them set up balloons and help them lift off and help them land. And I mean, you're standing right next to it, touching the balloon as it's full, and you're there with thousands of other people and hundreds of balloons. And you've got these balloons that range from Darth Vader and Yoda to the Wells Fargo wagon to these two bees holding hands. Like, it's not just beautiful balloons, but it's these real novel, incredible sights to see. So especially for kids, man, kids love it. My kids just go nuts for it. So it's fun, and if you've never seen it, it's absolutely something to put on your bucket list.
And what's the weather like now in Albuquerque, New Mexico?
Well, part of the reason they do the balloon fiesta in October is it started to cool down. It has been hundreds, like in the hundreds every day. I swear that I've been home. It's been in 102, 103, and so it started to cool down. Kind of middle of September kind of started, and now it's cooling down. So we'll probably hit 70, 75 today as a high, and we'll it's high desert, so we'll dip down into like the 40s at night. But this is kind of fall winter kind of merge a little bit. It'll get a little bit colder in the winter, but not too much colder. And when we get snow, it'll snow, but it's usually gone by the afternoon. So anyway,
Well,
we enjoy it.
I was trying to think of some places I could take my grandkids. Now, I live in Houston, and yes, there's a lot to do here, and we're pretty hot too. We're still, we just dipped down below 90 during the day, so
Yeah,
it's,
you're hot and sticky though. We're hot and dry.
yes, the stickiness does get to you. You can't get cooled off. It's almost like, ugh, even in the air conditioning, you're wet.
Yep. Yep. Yeah, having lived in Baton Rouge, I know that feeling well.
Yes, you do. Yeah.
Because we were only like 3 hours from you, I think. Something like that.
Yes, I think you're right. Only about 3 hours on I-10.
Mm-hmm.
I've always wanted to go to New Mexico, so you never know. I might choose the balloon festival as what I want to do next year with my grandkids. I
Well,
take them out of school because you do it during the school. So,
yeah, well, I mean, you could do it on the weekends are the best times though, Saturdays,
well,
Sundays. So even if you came over, Friday afternoon, and they do what they call the glow on Friday evenings. So the balloons won't take off, but they'll just light up. And so at dusk, it just becomes, all these hot air balloons with all their fires going. It's really, really cool. But
oh, that sounds good.
yeah, the weekends are the best times to come anyway.
All right, grandkids, if you're watching this or listening, you know where you're going next year, don't you?
Well, it's also a great time to come because now's when they're roasting green chili. And so New Mexico is really known for their green chilies, their hatch green chilies. And they'll actually bring these great big bins, these big black roasters out into the parking lots at the grocery stores, and people will buy 25-pound cases of peppers, and you just take them out into the parking lot and they roast them right there. So the whole city smells like roasting green chili right now, which is awesome.
Oh, that's great. Well, it sounds like you really like where you live. I'm actually looking for my next place.
Mm,
We were flooded out in Hurricane Harvey, and my house is still being worked on.
I'm
It's
sorry.
been over 2 years, and yeah, oh, the devastation. It was just awful. And every time it rains, we have PTSD over here.
Understandably so.
So
Well,
I'm
come on over here because it doesn't rain very much.
right, but every place has problems. What's your problems? You got tornadoes? What you got?
No, don't have tornadoes. I mean, we a lot of people move here to get away from snow, but we do have a little bit of snow. Last year was kind of a fluke where we had a lot of snow, but we get a lot of people moving from the East Coast that come here, moving to kind of Albuquerque as well as Santa Fe. Santa Fe is a little more secluded, so there's a lot of celebrities and actors and things that move up there because you've got kind of big plots of land and it's a lot more private, but it's high desert, so the sky is beautiful. It's big open blue skies. We have something like 300 days of sunshine a year here. But you've got the mountains really close by, and as far as problems, it's dry, it's desert. If you're used to green, it's not green. It's very brown. It's green along the Rio Grande, the river that goes through the middle of town, but that's about the only green. It's brown desert otherwise. So
Brown. Well, you know what they say about brown food, right? It's
what's
good.
I'll take it.
We think it is. I don't know. It's probably not good for you, but it's good. Oh, God.
Amen.
Yes. I have a question for you, Shawn. I'm really curious about what you're curious about. What has captured your attention in the last week, last month, even the last year, maybe even today?
Well, it's a great question, and you did forewarn me, so I have to let everyone know that this isn't coming out of the blue. She did forewarn me she was going to ask me this. So I am, it's funny because as we've been talking, I've been thinking a little bit about it, and how I was trying to kind of tie it back into who I am or what I do or whatever. But I think really what I'm curious about right now, and I think I've been curious about it, I don't know, off and on for the last couple of years, is more or less just people in general. I'm curious about people, what makes them tick, why do we do the things we do, the way we do them, when we do them. Is it the age old question of heredity or environment? Is it, are we the product of our circumstances? Like what, I think it's a combination of all those things, but traveling a lot, I see a lot of different things. And I think the misnomer with traveling is that everywhere is so different and everywhere is so unique. And yeah, there's a lot of unique things about different places, but really everywhere is very, very similar. when you get out and you start traveling and you go to see the sights, you go to New York and you see the Statue of Liberty and the Empire State Building and Times Square and all the things that about, but then you also start to ask yourself the question, like, how do people live here? How do people afford to live here? What kind of what does a day look like for a New Yorker? And then you go to Kansas and you're in the middle of a cornfield and you think, why do people stay here? What brought them here initially? And so that's a lot of what I get curious about. Is I get curious about people and their stories and what makes us tick, what makes us do what we do, when we do, and why we do it. Because if everywhere is very similar, you would think that we'd be very similar people. But I've found that, obviously people have different moral compasses and they have different desires and they have different aspirations. And it's just interesting to hear their perspectives, because I think as we listen to where people have come from and why they do what they do, and we see their side of the story, so to speak, then we're a lot more understanding. We're a lot more, we have less tendency to judge and less tendency to kind of make a call as to what kind of person these people are until we actually sit down and have a conversation with them. So, I would say that's something that keeps me curious on a regular basis. A question I'm always asking myself every time I go somewhere new.
Well, I just love you. I mean, I have fallen in love with you for sure. I should have been a psychiatrist or psychologist or somebody that delves into that, because that's my curiosity too. I can't understand how you think that. How you your politics, or your throwing trash on the ground, or you're being nice to somebody, or I can't get a grip on how people are so different.
So different.
And they're willing to fight about it. It's like, wait a minute. Let's remember, okay? We're all in this together here.
That's right. Well, and that's something I've never understood either. I've never been that person where, my pride has never overtaken me. I've never felt like I needed to defend myself. If somebody feels the way that they do, then that's their right. That's their choice. And so, there's certain things that, it's funny because my mom used to always say this to me. She used to always say, because, I would do things like dyeing my hair blue or piercing my ears or nose or whatever it was, and trying to kind of like, look what I did. And she would kind of shrug her shoulders and say, as long as you're not hurting anybody else. And so then it was like, well, I didn't get the rise that I wanted to, and I really don't want my nose pierced, so I'm not going to keep this in now. And so it's just interesting how, because as you get older, your needs, your wants, your goals, your desires, all those things change. They evolve, and it might not change completely, but it changes drastically. And I think that's the thing that you have to keep in mind too, is I think it's easy, especially as a parent, it's easy to see, or what I try to do anyway, and I shouldn't say it's easy, because everybody's got their different circumstances, but for me as a parent, I have to constantly, when something goes wrong with one of my kids, I have to step back and say, well, what were my thoughts when I was 7 years old, and why did I think that was okay? And I try to take myself back to being in their shoes. And I think a lot of times if we did that too, if we step back and we put ourselves in other people's shoes more, then it'd be totally different conversations.
I think you're very right. I find that one of God's gifts to me was my ability to see from different perspectives and to teach people how to do that. So if I see people that are really going at it, my thoughts are, let me show them why they think that. Okay, let me ask them some questions so that they can understand maybe where the other person's coming from. I'm not a mediator or anything like that. I just find it helpful to have somebody show people, well, maybe they're thinking that because of this or that. And unless they're angry, if they're angry and they're doing that, it's like, okay, just leave them alone. I don't want to deal with
Hmm.
that. But if they just can't understand, um, and when you're in it, it's harder.
Absolutely.
You have a third party say, well, maybe it's this or maybe it's that. So yeah, I totally agree with you. Thank you.
Well, I think that, regardless of whether it's a relationship or business or whatever, there's two basic skills that are really missing nowadays, and that's the ability to kind of critically think, and step outside the situation and say why and how, and the other thing is just the ability to communicate. People are so quick to rush to judgment, or they're so quick to make up their mind that that they just become immovable in that, and then all of a sudden, you can't hear anything else, and there's no way you're going to understand if you can't hear. And so I think those are two main things. I always say this, in what I do. I think there's two things missing in schools. There should be, because these are life skills that everyone will use. The people need to learn how to manage money, and they need to learn how to cook, because those are two skills that you'll lose, or you'll use throughout your life regardless of what you go into. But the same thing nowadays is that the two skills people are really lacking is the ability to step back and be, critically think, and the other one is just basic communication.
Yeah, lack of communication can bring down the largest,
Oh
corporation
yeah,
in the world. It really can. So
absolutely.
you got to work on that. Well, thank you. Thank you, Shawn. The time just flew by. I could talk to you for hours. You're just so kind, and I bet you're a fantastic chef and teacher and mentor and whatever it is that you do. I'd love to have you back again if you don't mind. Reach out,
Absolutely.
yeah, reach out, and let's dive in a little deeper into what you're doing and how you're helping people. Don't worry, everybody. I have all his links and everything that he wanted to share with us so that you can reach out to Shawn. And if you want to check out the Balloon Festival with me next year, you be sure and let me know, because I'm going to look you up when I'm there, and I'm going to
Absolutely.
introduce you to my grandkids.
Good. Well, we'll keep the guest room open.
Oh, good. Yay. Yay. All right. Well, thank you for being here.
Thank
And
you.
we'll see you, or you can hear us next time. Till then, bye for now. Stay curious.